What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Pack to Sleeve. My name is Justin, and today we have another weekly winnings for you. I once again played mono green at our FNM this week, and I went 3-0 again. So extending our winning streak to 18 matches. So today, rather than show you a brief deck tech, because I have not changed the list in a couple of weeks, so I will once again, if this is your first time, if you want to check out the deck list of where I go through the deck and talk about some of the changes, I'll post a link in the upper corner here. But today what I want to do is talk a little bit about maybe some of the changes that I want to make moving forward, as the meta has changed a little bit at my LGS. As well as where we can maybe get a couple more edges and talk about a little bit why adapting to your local meta is important. So why do I have these 4 cards in front of me? Well, so these are kind of the options of, you can see where I have adapted to our meta currently. Number 1 here was the one of Garretts Harbinger. This was twofold. One, I didn't have the 4th Stonecoil Snake, which I recently got the 4th copy of, so I can now drop this out. But also, because there were 2 lists, one a mono black aggro and one like a Rakdos control removal deck, and so hexproof from black actually meant something. But I think it just loses too much of its ability against the other decks. And so, especially because now we had, like in this past week, we only had 5 people show up, so, which is perfectly understandable. But we had 2 other mono green or green white mid-range type lists. We had a Esper Walkers or 4-color Walkers with Nicol Bolas, and we had a mono red list. And so Garretts Harbinger is not as good in those situations, and so dropping this out of the list makes sense. Adding in the 4th Stonecoil also makes sense. The other one of the things that I think is a little bit different is normally most people play the Shifting Ceratops in the sideboard. Fantastic sideboard, bring it in versus any kind of mono blue control list or any blue X control list, not mono blue. I mean, if someone's playing mono blue, obviously this is just a powerhouse. But most of those Bant lists that people have been playing have not been there in a couple weeks. So moving this back to the sideboard, I don't think you ever want to drop this, but moving this out of the main board, I think makes sense. 4 mana is a lot. It is a difficult creature to deal with, but I usually like playing this once I have 5 mana available, so I can give it haste and just pop them with it. So that is one to consider. I also play 25 lands, and so thinking about dropping down to 24, as there have been multiple occasions where I've had, where I've just gotten flooded or drawn like 3 or 4 straight lands, and so I was experimenting a bit this week, and particularly on the draw after sideboarding, was cutting a land, and I had no issues with that. So thinking about maybe dropping down to 24 lands. And then the other one is Mobilized District. Once again, Mobilized District is fantastic in a format with Team of Rec and like the Bant control lists, because their sweepers don't touch it, obviously, unless they plus up onto Fairy and then sweep it that way. But Mobilized District is a lot harder to hit. But I think in a lot of these more creature-based mid-range matchups or aggro matchups, switching this to Bonder's Enclave, so I can, as long as I control a creature with 4 power or greater, I can draw a card and keep the card advantage going, keep the pressure on. I think those are really good options. Moving this back into the main, this card is fantastic versus the aggro lists. A 5/5, particularly for mono red, and even some of the other green lists, is just hard to deal with. So even if they're not able to attack, they can just be a really big threat. And if you ever get Vivien on the board, suddenly this becomes a 7/7 with trample. That's really hard to deal with. So I think I'm going to try moving these back into the main board. I have really tried hard to make Sporeweb Weaver to try this out versus mono red. Brought it in every time I've played it, and I've never drawn it, so I think my deck is advantaged enough against mono red that I can probably drop Spore Web Weaver out of the sideboard and try something else. So what else am I thinking about trying? I think as the meta, particularly the local store, shifts back to much more creature-based, I think Elder Gargaroth goes up in value because it is a powerhouse card and is able to generate more and more creatures. And once again, like with Lovestruck Beast, it's just power and toughness is really hard for a lot of other decks to deal with. And being able to just constantly spit out 3/3s or gain 3 life, I think, is something worth trying out. So I think I'm going to try those in the sideboard, Lovestruck Beast back into the main, maybe try Bonder's Enclave, dropping a land. And of course, stay flexible as people are changing up decks, different people come, and seeing how people adapt to this mono green deck. But I think the important thing is to stay flexible, stay aware of what your local meta is, and so you can try and be ahead of the curve. So I think those are some of the changes that I am going to try out this week, see if I can stay ahead of the curve, keep the win streak going, see if I can get over 20 wins here in a row. But let's talk about this week's matches. So this week, round 1, I played versus the 4-color Planeswalker Super Friends deck. Game 1, I just was able to put a lot of pressure on, had a Stone Coil Serpent, and then I was able to mutate Gem Razor on top of it, so it was a 7/7 Trampler, just had a lot of pressure on really quickly, and was able to avoid an Extinction Event because the 2 creatures that I had on the board were both even CMC, and so that could have been a really big blowout, so that's one thing to be careful of when you're mutating it. In particular with Gem Razor, is if you don't diversify your threats against certain decks, you could easily get blown out. But if I had done it, what was it? There was another point where I could have had it on as a 3-drop instead of a 4-drop, and so it would have made it a lot more difficult for Extinction Event to hit me. Luckily, he did not draw Extinction Event, and I was able to win anyway. But just something to keep in mind as you're trying to improve and get better, to keep in mind what answers the opposing deck has. Round 2 was versus mono red. The person has lost to me before on mono green, didn't like their chances, and so scooped me, and so I got that one. And then the last round I faced off versus the same green-white mid-range list that I played against last week. Once again, was able to win. This one was a lot tougher. In game 1, they drew all 4 of their Bronze-Hide Lions, which is a tough card to deal with. And then this was one of those games where I drew multiple lands in a row, and I think if I had had Bonder's Enclave, I might have been able to power through it. But in game 2, I was able to put a lot of pressure down with going 1-drop, 2-drop, mutate, and then Questing Beast, and was just able to finish the game really quickly. And then in game 3, they got stuck on 2 lands, and once again, I was able to put a lot of pressure on pretty quickly to maintain my winning streak. And so we have another foil promo pack. So let's see what comes in this one. Once again, I got to see. I may be at my limit on Core 21 packs, so if I am, I'll start giving away the codes, because I think each account can only have 6 of these codes, so I'll check and see how many I have. But first is our foil Core 2021 card, which is Ghostly Pilferer. For 1 and a blue, a 2/1 Spirit Rogue. Whenever it becomes untapped, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card. Whenever an opponent casts a spell anywhere from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card and discard a card, and it can't be blocked this turn. So kind of reminds you back to like Glint Sleeve Siphoner type of card, except you have to pay 2 mana instead of 2 energy. So might be a little much, but an interesting card nonetheless, and it is a rogue, which is a relevant creature type. All right, sweet. We got our second Frantic Inventory foil. So for 1 and a blue is an instant, draw a card, then draw cards equal to the number of cards named Frantic Inventory in your graveyard. And last but certainly not least is Imprisoned in the Moon. All right. This was an all blue pack. Imprisoned in the Moon, a card from Eldritch Moon, is for 2 and a blue for an enchantment Auro. Enchant creature, land, or planeswalker. Enchanted permanent is a colorless land with tap to add a colorless mana to your mana pool and loses all other card types and abilities. Interesting. I know they had done this with a couple cards. They've got a list. I didn't remember that Imprisoned in the Moon was on that list, but either way, interesting card. I know it sees Commander play, I believe, so not going to be unhappy about that one. But that is our weekly winnings for the week. If you haven't already, I'd love it for you to hit that subscribe button. Leave a note in the comments, like the video, let me know how I'm doing. Let me know how you like the format of weekly winnings, if there's any changes you would like to see. But otherwise, I am all tapped out for now, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.